Deep in the Yucatan Peninsula, you'd be surrounded by the sounds of teeming life, but none, or at least very little of it, would be human. You'd hear the chirps of birds that live over there, the buzz of bugs that live there, and the slither of snakes that stay over yonder. Bear with me here, I'm a history guy, not a wildlife guy. But what you won't hear is the bustling sounds of human conflict and commerce. But indeed, dear friend, over 1,000 years ago, the jungle lowlands in Central America and the modern-day countries of Mexico, Belize, Honduras, and Guatemala was one of the most populated places in the world, home to the Maya civilization, which has captivated archaeologists, historians, researchers, and just regular people for hundreds of years now, with its dazzling architecture and air of mystery. I mean, imagine being a migrating native or European from antiquity and wandering into one of these structures. It would be equally as mysterious and ominous to either one in a lot of instances. Both would be like, that is sick. Who did that? Naturally, with its coolness factor cranked through the roof, a whole field of study exists for piecing together the clues and available evidence to form conclusions on the details and doings of this seemingly lost civilization. And all of the people who dedicated their life to it did a pretty bang-up job, and our grasps on the ins and outs of the Maya is pretty solid at this point. How big were the Maya, and why did it fall? Was it small and scattered? Impressive with its architecture and art, but altogether minuscule and fleeting? Simply abandoned like your local mall? Fun memories and all, but altogether not sustainable? Or was it massive in its scale and uniformity, like its contemporaries in Rome and China, with an abandonment echoing themes of Greek tragedy? Well, that is still a hotly debated topic in the anthropology community, and there's quite a few big-time disagreements in schools of academia. But with some groundbreaking new methods in research, the previous thought figure of about 2 to 4 million people has shot way up, making its seemingly sudden fall much more dramatic. It's just how much up is what needs to be discussed. But let me drag you along a little bit. Come on, give a small guy some watch time. What do we know about the Maya civilization already? Well, first things first, the Maya people actually still exist, with their direct descendants still living in the region today. But for the ease of discussion, we're talking exclusively about the glyph-spitting, pyramid-stacking Maya of old. The Maya were an Amerindian Mesoamerican society that peaked at about 700 AD, but have existed for much longer, with the earliest examples of Maya society being as far back as 1000 BC, and advanced civilization up to the 11th century. Their history is broken down into three periods. Pre-classic from 1000 BC to 250 AD, classic 250 AD to 900 AD, and post-classic 900 to 1521 AD. The classic period is further chopped up into two more sectors, with 250 to 550 being early classic and 600 to 900 being late classic. Important Maya architectural sites include Tikal, Palenque, and Copan. The Maya's main claim to fame is their signature architecture, and the vast amount of surviving Maya architecture is from the late classic, coining the field term late classic bias. While this is not a professionally held opinion and merely a flash of off-the-cuff genius by the show's wonderful host, I hypothesize the reason for this is the deconstruction of old temples from fallen or usurped dynasties to be used as raw material to build new temples for the new, glorious, divine, ever self-absorbent late classic Maya rulers. Those guys were egotistical. More on that later. The second most fascinating and hyped up thing about this ever hot topic society is their beautiful writing system. Maya glyph script litters the walls of their temples, pottery, shells, jade, and codice books, hypnotizing in both its artistic expression and disciplined uniformity. Interestingly enough, despite Maya sites being discovered as far back as the 16th century, it took until the 19th century for it to be recognized as a writing system. And this is funny to me because what do y'all think they did it for? For fun? Just blotting down all those symbols and faces and squares all over everything of royal importance just because they thought it looked cool? I know the Spanish were a little skeptical of their new Western Hemisphere roommates' development and ability. But come on now, they wrote it down in paper books in lines. But I digress. When the script was discovered to be advanced, efforts began immediately to decipher it. But it turned out to be highly advanced, with certain glyphs meaning syllables and certain ones meaning whole nouns, names, or locations, and the nuances in structure and meaning based on regional dialect. And even the best of the best humanities experts from the 19th century were left scratching their their heads.
Okay, real quick, y'all. I can't get this map straight, bruh.
Okay, back to the show. But in the 20th century, despite all its turmoil, many persistent historians, both young and old, local and international, on both sides of the Iron Curtain, all came together and through a testament of the resilience of the field, deciphered about 90% of it. And now understanding of the Maya became much easier because we could get it directly from the horse's mouth. So how was this society structured? Maya society was made up of a large network of city-states, with some cohesion culturally, but all completely different entities politically. And they made sure that they wrote about how they were different entities politically. Warring with the old other Maya who made the pyramids down the street was a big part of the Maya identity. At the top of the food chain was a divine ruler called the Ahau, and a senate of advisors. The upper echelon of society was pretty standard compared to its counterparts in the Eastern Hemisphere. God-ordained ruler at head, senate of advisors, and a powerful merchant class that pulls more strings that they let on. Much like today, money is everything. Maya is a general cultural umbrella, and they never had anything close to an empire, as far as we know. Rulers and big shots from each respective city took their local identity very seriously. They are vastly different from the guys who stay a few trees away from them. They're like Eastern Europeans or something, or like New Yorkers. People from Long Island aren't even human. My guy, that is wild. Something that the Mayan inscriptions very much revealed is that within their social hierarchy was a society that was very top-heavy, with utmost importance placed on achievement, glamour status, dominance, and possession. For the most part, Mayan glyphs were actually a symbol of status. Let's break down the 3 most common places for Mayan glyphs. And public courtyards, ball courts, temples, and anything for ceremonious use. Glyph artisans were commissioned to make extravagant, visually impressive statues, pillars, and monoliths of Mayan inscriptions that read about the current ruler's family heritage, triumphs and achievements, their connections to the gods, their cool car collections, so on and so forth. These are the main ones that we see as they serve the purpose of showing the common class the ruling class might. They serve as testaments to the achievements of the Ahua and their connection to the mythology, as well as their tenure in the kingdom. Great importance was placed on the visual essence and intimidation factor of these monuments, as most of the common class were illiterate. I admit they did their job well, as they impressed people around the world to this day. The second most common, as well as the saddest, is the Maya glyph codexes. This is most likely where all of the Maya literature, poetry, philosophy, and academic study went. But it was printed in paper books made of bark, and the Spanish burned it for some reason. Why destroy history? It happens to this day. Just why? And the third most common allows for our transition into political layout, and sets the stage for the intense regional politics that define the Maya civilization. Maya glyphs were often painted on ceramic vessels for exclusive use by the elite. These vessels were most commonly painted with scenes of mythology, with the glyph label at the top rim labeling what contents the vessel is designed to hold, and glyphs blended with artistic depictions of mythological lore or aristocratic customs that were important to the blanket Maya society. These vessels are well preserved, as they were priceless, and rulers were often buried with their favorites. These cups, read left to right, were captivating in their handmade beauty, but weren't made just to be aesthetic. Their main purpose was diplomacy. Diplomacy is another form of conquest, says Lelouch's dad in Code Geass. And the Maya who traveled to the future, watched the show, and then traveled back in time certainly heeded to this advice, as Maya society took diplomacy and trade as seriously as they did warfare. The painted vessels made their main appearance at large feasts in the temples. But put the sauce down, Uncle Randy. You gotta stay locked in for this, as these feasts existed almost exclusively for the establishment of diplomatic, trade, and military alliances with rival city-states, as each vase was a one-of-one product that were offered as a ceremonious gift of goodwill, cycling between two cities back and forth as a testament of their new resolve of cooperation. Vessels gained value over time naturally, and the ones that were hundreds of years old, even for them, were worth exorbitant amounts of money. A gift of one of these bad boys could mean serious business for a future partnership. Successful artists who made these vases were extremely wealthy celebrities, and an Ahua would often send renowned local artists over to their allies to do commissioned work. All of this was done to maintain a healthy economy for their trade networks, as city-to-city canoe trade of both common and luxury products were important to Maya society, especially considering the multi-biome nature and availability of certain agriculture, minerals, dyes, and so forth. So Maya society was clearly not just a bunch of dudes throwing rocks on top of each other and scratching their heads, and were advancing about parallel to medieval Europe and other other Eastern contemporaries. That's really cool. It's a big world out there, you know. But how big was the society itself? How many temples? How many people? How many fancy artists sipping wine and making glyph cups for the Maya Kardashians? Well, this number previously was thought to be about 2 to 4 million at any given time for a Maya peak of society. But long story short, in the last decade or so, it has jumped up to about 15 million. My gosh, Russ, that's like a 700% increase. How did that happen? Relax, I'm getting there. This change of academic thought came with the recent implementation of LiDAR technology in the field of archaeology. LiDAR stands for Light Detection and Ranging, scanning landscapes with laser technology to get an idea of the contents of the surface. LiDAR surveys conducted by planes could give the info of the contents of a landscape even through thick jungle, which has previously hindered estimations of Maya society scale. In 2018, the Paculam LiDAR initiative crunched the data of a LiDAR scan in the Maya Biosphere Reserve in Guatemala to reveal upwards of 50,000 buildings, defensive structures, highways, and much more. Absolutely blowing expectations out of the water, as well as blowing the socks off of the entire archaeological world. This level of untouched sites in just one sector of the Maya lowlands is absolutely absurd. But in reality, the LiDAR data that was examined was the data for areas where archaeological field work is being done nearby, and then the numbers scaled up and projected across the entire reserve. So skeptics thought that these numbers could be a bit biased. But in 2024, Lucail Tomas and others at the University of Tulane eased these concerns with the research paper titled Running Out of Space, Environmental LiDAR in the Crowded Ancient Landscape of Campeche, Mexico, where LiDAR data was utilized from a survey taken for the purpose of examining the effects of deforestation called Alianza M Red, taking place in Campeche, Mexico. The study wanted to use pseudo-random samples from a non-archaeological survey to yield unbiased results. But the results just ended up doubling down on what the other researchers were saying. How analyzing LiDAR data works is that the raw laser readings are taken, then data experts and analysts map out that data, code it, vector it, color it, and so forth to create mappings that are digestible to the anthropologist guys that aren't the numbers type. Left brain, right brain, you feel me? The reason that we can't just take a look at LiDAR scans of entire areas of land, because LiDAR data, being newer technology, needs to be processed and interpreted by hand, making big picture stuff just incredibly labor intensive and really just not feasible, although time will tell. The basic gist of this study is to take 3 random blocks to just take a gander at the Maya activity that can be found. Expectations were again exceeded, with block 1 showing the regular amount of Maya activity for modern estimation, block 3 being fairly rural and spread apart but definitely with some structures present, but block 2 having 2 major urban areas being 2 kilometers apart, with the one in block 2 being massive, with the boundaries of the city being cut off by the boundaries of the research block. This exciting site is now called Valeriana and stands parallel with other super sites in the Maya world with its scale, and the scan picks up readings of temples, causeways, plazas, ball courts, and so forth. Valeriana sounds less like a Maya name and more like the name of the researcher's ex, but you know me, I digress. From the 3 sample blocks created, a total of 6,764 structures were found, confirming the suspicions of the forefathers of the anthropology field that Campeche, Mexico is freaking popping with Maya life. The big picture conclusion of this study is the refuting of the claims of former experts that say that the Maya were not a large-scale civilization due to low population density. Most people lived spread apart and cultivated agriculture, being summoned for big events like warfare, sports, ceremonies, and other things like that. Before these studies, the anthropology field thought that the Maya was an ethno-linguistic group with a real knack for astronomy and architecture, but overall low in numbers and social energy generation. But now it is shown that rather, the Maya lowlands was a super civ that had a unique urban layout really only feasible in a jungle-style setting, with low density but incredibly consistent settlement across a vast swath of land, with the average distance of one settlement to the next settlement being 4 kilometers across the whole damn civilization. People who know stuff about urban layout know that this is some unreal population spread and consistency. Alright, so you take a look at their political layout and their population numbers and you can figure that these people had it going on. Matter of fact, at their height, they were most likely keeping up with the pack on the world stage. But as easy as it is to blame the Spanish, and throw in the British too while we're at it, the Maya lowlands fell into ruin and decay far before the Europeans ever arrived. So how did the Maya civilization fall. So remember earlier when I was waffling on about Maya ceramics and you were like, oh my gosh, Russ, get to the point, please. But I just kept going on and on about how sick those painted pots were. Well, forgive me for getting a little nuanced with it, but that was a bit of foreshadowing. One of the most popular figures to depict on the ceremonial vases was the deity Chakh, the god of rain. Chakh had a high importance in Maya culture, and Maya rulers often commissioned depictions of him in their honor. With it being the jungle and all, rain was seen as the spiritual source of all life. Rain was the cause for agriculture, for drinking water. Chakh littered the designs of these high-value bases because rain created the rivers that they were being traded on. The wealth was created by rain. The food was created by rain. And the rulers of Maya society created large reservoirs for rain to be collected and kept sanitary for the local subjects. If it rained, Chakh is again blessed, the rightful ruler of the land, and if the subjects wanted something to drink, they must bow. In my studies, I could not help but notice how robust and self-exalting the Maya elite became in the society's late classic height, making increasingly more monuments depicting their glorious lineage and blessings from the gods, and less about their love for astronomy and mathematical study. In their art, behind closed doors, from oligarch to oligarch, the people are always depicted on their knees, bathed in the ruler or ruler's father's glory, and the gods on the ruler's side. The late classic period had a nearly insatiable love for status and acclaim. The depictions of the gods and the depictions of themselves became hard to identify as separate. They truly believed that they were one and the same. Well, in 800 AD, a historic mega drought began, and the Maya society collapse is theorized to be less of a sudden and dramatic collapse and more of a stagnant decay, with a domino effect of city-states falling to abandonment rather than destruction. With no rain, there was no trade routes. The rivers dried up. The wealth that the elite depended on could not feasibly be obtained, and it was difficult to compensate their militaries or artists or writers or anyone. Throughout their antiquity, the falling of the rain was credited as a testament to the ruler's rightful ordinance of the land, a divine approval flowing down from the sky. The crowds of thousands of people would assemble to the reservoirs by the temple to confirm this approval, and their loyalty was won. But with the rain not falling, doubt was casted onto their leaders. They were left to fend for themselves in their fields, to drink from the trees that they themselves cultivated. Without the rain, why should they listen to the king? After all, the gods do not approve of him. And without his wealth and resources, what does he have to offer them? Soon enough, bands of starving and desperate Maya started to congregate and raise the land. If they arrived at one of the great settlements, the Hau'ua couldn't summon his military. If they could not be paid or provided for, then why should they even come to him? By the end of the drought in the late 900s, the vast majority of the Maya lowlands sat in decay. Due to the collapse of any form of societal structure and the ways of barbarism erupting from the population, it was also majorly depopulated. If you look up why this Maya civilization fell, they'll rattle off things like socio-political problems, starvation, deforestation, and civil unrest. But it all began with the stopping of the rain. Listen, I'm not an expert, and I'm hypothesizing here. Plenty of research needs to be done on this wonderfully fascinating civilization. Who knows what all went into this beautiful society's collapse? And I'd like to one day help contribute to finding these answers. Still, I wonder if at some point one of the divine Maya rulers and all of his glamorous monuments called upon his people to assemble. Wonder what he thought when he checked his courtyard to find that no one came. Wonder if even the royal reservoirs even dried up, leaving him thirsty himself. I wonder if he realized he is far from a god.